You can be in the middle of a hurricane, or you can be on a calm day. North is still north. You could be in a thunderstorm. North is still north. People can yell at you. North is still north.
How dare you?
It doesn't change fundamental things. And in this business, right is still right, even if you stand by yourself.
Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. They just don't get it. They don't get that it's not a good look. Every time you don't get what you want, or every time a decision is made that you may disagree with, acting like spoiled little babies, unhinged, emotional wrecks, and completely losing your minds is just not a good look. You aren't convincing anyone. You know, stuff like this.
Enough is enough! Enough is enough! Enough is enough! Enough is enough!
You know, none of what you just saw there is an argument, but what you just saw there is essentially the perfect representation for the most recent liberal left-wing reaction to the most recent decision handed down by Mr. Clarence Thomas. What left-wingers don't seem to realize is that the issue that they're arguing here is not something trivial. The right to self-defense, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Constitutional rights is not something you get to screech over and then just magically you get your way. You have to have a coherent, legal, ethical argument, which, let's just face it, left-wingers don't have. And so I want to go over the most recent decision. I want to tackle some of those weak left-wing arguments. Of course, we're going to go over some major left-wing hypocrisy, thanks to a beautiful clip from Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and in general, probably the most consistent theme throughout this video, the overall collective left-wing meltdown. We've got some stuff to get into, folks, so let's roll the tape. Alright friends, so here's the decision. Breaking, Supreme Court strikes down New York concealed carry restrictions. In the case of the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, the Supreme Court has ruled that a New York gun control law that required citizens to show proper cause to obtain a concealed carry license is in violation of the Constitution. The vote broke down on party lines 6-3 in the 135-page opinion, with the majority opinion written by Justice Clarence Thomas. Thomas was joined in the majority by Justice Roberts, Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. And once again, a continuation of a video that I released yesterday. This is why voting is so important. This is why who is elected president is not just a small, irrelevant thing and not a continuation of the status quo. Without Donald Trump's 3 scoops, this would have never happened, and the continued erosion of your constitutional rights and civil liberties would continue. But let's follow along the article. The opinion discusses the New York state law that made it a crime to own a firearm without a license, whether that possession was inside the home or external to it. The only way for New Yorkers to obtain an unrestricted permit was to prove that they had, quote, proper cause to do so. A person had to demonstrate a special need for self-protection indistinguishable from that of the general community. An absolutely ridiculous notion to begin with. I mean, living in New York in the first place should be cause, one of the most restrictive gun control heavy states in the country that is currently going through a crime epidemic and has had 2 major mass shootings in the last few months. But once again, Democrats take the side that only criminals are allowed to be armed as they continue their rampage on law-abiding citizens. Completely despicable. But here are some excerpts from Justice Thomas's decision. Thomas writes that New York's proper cause requirement violates the 14th Amendment by preventing law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms in public for self-defense. It is undisputed that petitioners Koch and Nash, to ordinary law-abiding adult citizens, are part of the people whom the Second Amendment protects. Thomas said further, citing Heller, and no party disputes that handguns are weapons in common use today for self-defense, he wrote. And so this is a very basic, very simple decision. It's not entirely surprising at all. You have constitutional violation on one side in the state of New York, and on the other side in the Supreme Court, well, they're going to enforce the Constitution. Constitution. What's so complicated? What's so controversial? Nothing. But lefties are going absolutely nuts. And the same liberals who have been going on about how unconstitutional of a president Donald Trump was, the same liberals who don't stop talking about democracy and mud democracy and mud democracy, are now openly calling for states and citizens to defy the courts. Keith Olbermann, who got ratioed beyond belief, writes, "It has become necessary to dissolve the Supreme Court of the United States. The first step is for a state the court has now forced guns upon to ignore this ruling. Great. You're a court? Why and how do you think you can enforce your rulings? Hashtag ignore the court." Nothing but emotion and an unhinged reaction, which is all we're seeing here. I mean, there's no coherent argument. All we're seeing is fear-mongering and the Supreme Court must be abolished and is compromised. No real arguments, and the arguments that we are hearing are, well, extremely dumb is probably the nicest way that I could put it.
We, the president, myself, many of us are deeply concerned and troubled by the Supreme Court's ruling today. It, I believe, defies common sense and the Constitution of the United States.
The most recent Supreme Court ruling that upholds the Constitution and people's constitutional rights to self-defense defies the Constitution. I mean, these people aren't even trying to hide their disingenuous nature anymore. And it's no longer about getting weapons or getting arms out of criminals' hands or people who want to cause harm to innocent people. It seems as though their main focus these days is law-abiding citizens. They want to come after your guns. Law-abiding, regular people. That's what they're pissed off about here. They're not angry that some legislation made it easier for criminals to get weapons who wish to do harm on innocent, law-abiding citizens. They're angry that the Supreme Court made a decision that supports regular, law-abiding citizens' right to carry a concealed weapon for the purpose of self-defense, in or out of their home. That's what they're angry about, which is completely ironic because that's probably one of the greatest solutions to the crime epidemic and violence epidemic that we're currently seeing. You think criminals will think twice if a huge portion of the population is carrying a concealed firearm? Obviously. But their goal is not to save lives or to stop criminals. Their goal is to disarm the public because a disarmed public is a more easily controlled and subdued public. Those are the facts. And what an absolutely absurd argument from Kamala Harris. Lefties just love to bend and twist the definition of words and terms to benefit whatever argument they're making. Defies the Constitution. How completely absurd. Ben Shapiro released a tweet on his timeline that just completely highlights the hypocrisy of the left here. The left. Oh my god, the Supreme Court is not going to protect our constitutional right to an abortion, which appears nowhere in the Constitution. Also the left. Oh my god, the court is saying there's a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, the text of which is explicit. Almost as though the left sees constitutional law as a Trojan horse for their policy preferences, rather than as a mechanism by which the Supreme Court is delegated power to defend the text of the Constitution. And he is completely correct. All they ever do is try to manipulate and twist the facts to their own benefit. New York Governor Kathy Hochul recently released a statement where she made this very weak argument right over here.
Since 1788, when the Constitution of the United States of America was ratified, and I would like to point out to the Supreme Court justices that the only weapons at the time were muskets. I'm prepared to go back to muskets. I don't think they envision the high-capacity assault weapon magazines intended for battlefields as being covered from it, but I guess we're just going to have to disagree.
We hear this from the left all the time, that the Constitution was referring to muskets and it was a different time. No, the Constitution chose very delicate, specific wording for a reason. I mean, first off, there's the shall not be infringed part, but I mean, whatever, we'll ignore that one for now. But the Second Amendment doesn't refer to muskets, and only within the context of fighting the British Empire. No, the Constitution refers to all arms. Technically, if you really get down to it, the Constitution guarantees the right to the American citizen access and legal ownership to any means of self-defense or arm, not just muskets. I mean, these arguments are an insult to my intelligence, but what is a true insult to my intelligence is MSNBC bringing on Lori Lightfoot, the last person who should ever be talking about gun violence, to make a strong stance against the Supreme Court's decision.
It's devastating. I mean, it's just fundamentally devastating. And increasingly what we're seeing is not quote unquote gang related. The proliferation of illegal guns is a challenge of our time. And we have got to rise up as a country and recognize that the devastating lifelong impact that it has on victims. And I'm glad you asked the questions, because I think too many times in these conversations, the victims and survivors are second thought. Not in my city. They have bonded together, the grace that they show and purpose over pain that they engage in is incredible.
Yeah, I don't think I really need to say much or add much commentary here. You guys get why this is absolutely ridiculous. But that's exactly it, folks. Not much needs to be said in general. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what data you present. It doesn't matter what emotional argument or rhetoric you put out there. The right to bear arms and the right to self-defense shall not be infringed. Those are the words. It's not just a constitutional right, it's a human right. The right to protect yourself, your family, and your home against anybody that seeks to do you harm, or to protect your community against a corrupt, tyrannical regime is not up for debate or discussion. And no amount of crying and whining, and certainly no amount of tweeting, is going to change that. We'll end this video with one clip and just leave it at that.
And you've got laws against that.
Nothing like the same rights.
Well, you can go back to your country and worry about your no guns.
That's very kind of
We
you.
like ours here.
Thanks for watching, friends.